The rain had been falling all afternoon, slicking the cracked sidewalks of the old neighborhood with a sheen that reflected every neon sign and every passing headlight. The city had a way of chewing people up and spitting them out, and those who couldn't keep up were left to fade into the background like forgotten graffiti. At the edge of one such street, under the dim yellow glow of a failing lamppost, sat an old man. His coat was too thin for the chill of the night, his boots worn down at the soles, and his hat sagged low over eyes that seemed tired of being seen. He leaned on a cane that was older than the kids running wild in the alleys. A passerby might have thought him homeless, another relic of the city's unkind march forward. And perhaps that's what he wanted them to think, because no one looked twice at him anymore. No one except the wrong kind of people. The gang called themselves the Iron Rats, a name that sounded tough in their mouths but rang hollow outside their cracked tile hangouts. They were young, late teens, maybe early 20s, draped in hoodies, chains, and sneakers too clean to be bought with honest money. They prowled the streets for kicks, for wallets, for anyone who looked weak enough to be prey. And tonight, their eyes found the old man. "Yo, check this fossil out," one of them snickered, his voice loud enough to echo against the wet walls. The others turned, their laughter spilling into the night like broken glass. The old man didn't lift his head, didn't answer, just sat there as if the storm and the taunts were part of the same world he no longer cared about. "Hey, Grandpa," another called out, "ain't no nursing home out here?" They circled him, their sneakers slapping the puddles, their shadows stretching long in the lamplight. The old man's hand stayed steady on his cane, his breathing slow, even. One of them shoved his shoulder. "What you got in the bag, huh?" The canvas satchel by his side thudded softly as the thug nudged it with his shoe. The old man looked up at last, his eyes pale but sharp, like a storm breaking after years of calm. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, just stared. Something in that gaze made the leader's smirk falter for half a second, but bravado kept him going. "Man, this dude's done. Ain't even got a word to spit back." He leaned close, sneering. "What you hiding in there, huh? Some change? A sandwich?" Another snickered, maybe diapers. The laughter rose again, cruel and hollow, feeding off itself. The old man lowered his eyes, almost as if to hide from them, almost as if to submit, almost. The shove came harder this time, and the satchel spilled. Out tumbled not coins, not scraps, but a small wooden box, scarred by time, yet polished with care. It clattered on the pavement, the sound sharp, ringing in the silence that followed. The gang leader picked it up with a grin. "What's this? You're carrying toys, old man?" He flipped it open, and for the first time that night, laughter died. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay medals, rows of them, shining even under the weak lamplight. Bronze, silver, gold-toned, each etched with symbols the thugs didn't understand but instinctively respected. Medals of valor, of service, of sacrifice, the kind not handed out, but earned in fire, in blood, in years of battles they couldn't imagine. The old man reached out with a slow hand, his voice breaking the silence for the first time. "Put it back." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a beg. It was a command, low and steady, carrying a weight that pressed against their bravado. The leader hesitated, medals trembling in his hand. What is this?" The old man rose, cane still in hand, but now his back was straight, his shoulders squared, and the years seemed to fall away. The shadows shifted, not around prey, but around something they suddenly recognized as dangerous. "You wanted to know what I hide. I hide what I've done. who I was, who I can be again. The thugs exchanged uneasy glances. The youngest among them whispered, "Yo, those are like military medals, man." The leader forced a laugh, shaky. "So what? Old man used to play soldier. Big deal." But his grip on the box was clumsy now, the confidence draining from his fingers.
The old man stepped closer, the cane tapping against the pavement like the tick of a clock counting down. His eyes locked onto each of theirs one by one, and suddenly, they weren't looking at a frail relic anymore. They were staring into the eyes of someone who had walked through gunfire, who had carried men bleeding out in his arms, who had seen death and lived on a first-name basis with it. "You think you've seen fear?" the old man said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "You've seen nothing." The silence after hung heavier than the rain. Then he bent, took the box back from the trembling hands that offered it, and tucked it into his satchel. For a moment, the world was still. But the rats were rats, after all, and shame turned quickly to anger. "You think you can scare us, old man?" the leader spat, trying to recover face. "You think your little trinkets mean something here?" The old man gave him one last look, then turned his back and walked into the night, cane steady, shoulders unbowed. The gang stayed behind, shuffling, muttering, trying to laugh off the chill crawling down their spines. But deep down, they knew they had touched something bigger than them, something that didn't forgive. And as the rain washed the streets, none of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows across the road, another veteran, younger, still sharp. He had seen the whole thing, and he knew, with a certainty that burned in his chest, that the rats had just picked the wrong ghost to disturb. The city doesn't sleep, it just changes masks. By midnight, the downtown hum softened into something darker, a hum of wheels over wet asphalt, muffled voices and sirens in the distance. The iron rats scattered back to their hideout, a condemned building by the rail yard, their laughter forced, nervous, but louder than their unease. But the image lingered. The old man's eyes, those medals, that calm command. It clawed at their bravado, and shame burned hotter than fear. Their leader, Trey, paced in front of them, fists tight. Nah, we ain't letting some wrinkled vet clown us like that. Y'all saw the way he looked at us? Like we're bugs. He don't get to walk away after that." The others nodded, hungry for validation, but not entirely convinced. Malik, the youngest, whispered, "Man, maybe we just leave him be. Dude's different." Trey rounded on him. "Different? He's old, that's all. He got medals, big whoop, probably sitting on some VA pension, too. He walked off like he owned the street. Nah, we're gonna show him who runs it." The decision was made. Pride demanded blood. But what they didn't know was that the old man had already set the clock ticking the moment he rose from that bench. His name was Walter Kane. Once Captain Walter Kane, decorated combat veteran, special operations, 20 years in the dirt of places men like Trey couldn't find on a map. He had built his life on silence and shadows, but one thing the war had taught him was simple. Predators only understand force. And Walter, though his body carried age, had not forgotten force. The next evening, Trey and his crew found themselves back on their turf, tossing dice by the glow of a barrel fire. The air was heavy, restless. The silence that fell wasn't natural. It was pressed down by presence. One by one, they noticed. Walter stood at the edge of the alley, no longer hunched, no longer small, his coat gone, replaced by a dark jacket, boots laced high, cane nowhere in sight. The satchel was still there, but it looked heavier, purposeful. The gang laughed again, but it rang hollow. Trey forced his voice steady. "Look who came back! Grandpa wants a round too." Walter didn't move closer. He just set the satchel down and opened it. Inside wasn't money, wasn't food, but relics of another kind. A combat knife, sheathed, a folded map, a coil of cord, a battered photo of men in uniform, their faces young and fierce, and tucked at the bottom, the medals, gleaming like fire. "Do you know what these mean?" Walter asked, voice low but cutting through the night. "Each one is a ghost. Each one is a brother I buried. I earned them in places where men like you wouldn't last an hour."
The rat shifted uneasily. Walter's eyes narrowed. "And you laugh, you mock. You think the world bends for you, but I've buried better men than you'll ever be." Trey spat on the ground, though his hand trembled. "You think you scare me with your war stories?" Walter smiled faintly. "Not yet, but you will." That night, the city became his battlefield. The rats began to notice things missing, their stash of stolen goods raided, their hideout tagged with marks they didn't recognize, military unit symbols scrawled in chalk, their hangouts stalked by silence. One of them swore he saw a shadow following him through the alleys, boots echoing behind every step, though when he turned, nothing. Another found his knife collection gone, replaced by a single spent bullet on the table. Walter wasn't attacking them outright, not yet. He was dismantling them, the way you break an enemy before the battle begins. Fear set in. They argued, snapped at each other, but Trey's pride only deepened. "He's just one old man. We'll corner him, end it." But Walter had already cornered them. It happened 3 nights later in the rail yard. The rats thought they had the drop, waiting in shadows with bats and chains, nerves shot but bravado forcing them through. Then the floodlights snapped on. The yard roared with brightness, and there stood Walter, calm, steady, flanked by 2 other men, veterans, drawn by the story, by loyalty, by the silent brotherhood of service. They weren't armed with guns, but with presence, trained, unflinching, radiating danger. Walter's voice boomed across the yard. "You wanted to know who I am? You wanted to laugh. Now you'll listen." The rats froze. Trey tried to bark orders, but his words tangled. Walter stepped forward, medals glinting under the floodlight as he pinned one onto his chest, deliberately, his movement slow, ritualistic. "This one," he tapped it, "for pulling 2 men out of fire while mortars fell. This one, for holding a line when everyone else fell back. And this one," he looked directly at Trey, eyes burning, "for surviving what should have killed me 10 times over. I don't carry them to brag. I carry them because the dead don't deserve to be forgotten, and I'll be damned if I let cowards like you spit on their memory." The yard was silent, but for the hum of the lights. Trey's mask cracked, fear bleeding through. Walter's men stepped closer, and in that moment the rats knew they weren't predators anymore. They were children, out of their depth, staring at wolves. Walter didn't strike them, didn't lay a hand. Instead, he reached into his satchel and tossed something at Trey's feet. A folded American flag, worn, edges frayed. Trey stared, confused. Walter's voice was ice. "You think respect is given. It's not. It's earned, in blood, in loyalty, in sacrifice. You boys think you're hard. You've never seen hard. You want to laugh at the old man? Then you laugh knowing you mock the very thing that lets you walk these streets free." Trey's lips trembled. The rest of the rats hung their heads, unable to meet his gaze. Malik, the youngest, broke first, whispering, "I'm sorry." Walter's eyes softened just a fraction as he looked at Malik. "You can still choose who you'll be, but choose wisely." The other veterans stepped back, leaving the silence thick. Walter gathered his satchel, slung it over his shoulder, and with one last look at the broken rats, he turned and walked into the night. His cane returned to his hand, his step steady, his shadow stretching long. The rats never returned to that corner. Their swagger dissolved, Trey drifted, his power gone. Malik left the crew entirely, later seen helping an old neighbor carry groceries instead of lifting wallets. The city forgot the incident quickly, as it always does. But the rats remembered. And every time the rain fell on the cracked sideworks, they saw in the puddles not their reflections, but the pale, sharp eyes of the old man who carried ghosts and medals, and who reminded them that laughter at the wrong person could echo forever. And Walter Kane? He sat once more under that same lamppost, medals hidden away, the world passing him by. To anyone else, he was just an old man, but he knew, and so did they.